and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the second round of peace talks in Istanbul, hosted by Turkey and Qatar. And of course, they follow the Doha ceasefire agreement and, of course, aim to establish a concrete and verifiable mechanism to prevent cross-border terrorism from Afghan soil. We'll be talking about the likely outcome of these talks as they are going forward and what we can expect in terms of the pledges by both sides moving forward. We have with us Khurram Dastgir, who's a former defense minister, also leader PML-N. We'll also be joined by other guests during the course of the program. Thank you for being with us. Khurram Sahab, as far as these talks are concerned, first of all, how are you looking at them? You're looking at, of course, there are, we are hoping that they will be a positive outcome. We've also had a statement from the defense minister saying that if they were to fail, there will be war, but he's hopeful and seems likely that they will be successful. How are you looking at them?
The simple answer would be cautious optimism, because if one looks at the ground in the week since the Doha agreement or understanding was reached, there seems to be some positivity, because in the last 7 days there has been no major attack of any kind in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Balochistan from the Afghanistan side. So that gives one cause for optimism. But there has been some negativity coming from the Afghan side with their statements, particularly regarding the Durand Line. And of course, their recent embrace of India and the statements they have made regarding their friendship with India. There's also been, in the last week, this new, I don't know, you can say rumor or some kind of threat that the government of Afghanistan might stop water flowing into Pakistan. So this water issue, which is the same as India threatening to stop Pakistan's water, is cause for concern. But for the last 7 days, the situation on the ground, at least on Pakistan's border, has been more peaceful than we have seen in recent days. So therefore, I think I would concur with the Honorable Defense Minister that there is some cause for optimism.
From that point of view, when you talk about the fact that, of course, during the last 7 days, we've seen things getting better from that regard. Does that give us the inkling that perhaps, there is the ability for the Afghan Taliban to in fact clamp down on terror? Because, we've been having that debate for a while, and, whether they have the ability to deal with all kinds of terrorism that does emanate from the Afghan soil.
I look at it slightly non-traditionally, because I personally, and this is my personal judgment, don't differentiate between the Tehrik-e-Taliban Afghanistan and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Because the tactics that they used are the same. It is just that the Tehrik-e-Taliban Afghanistan used to have the justification of trying to eliminate Western forces, particularly the United States, from their soil, which they felt that were occupying Afghan soil. And of course, there was some measure of religious argument to that fight. Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan no longer has any argument to attack Pakistan. So it's not a question of that, Tehrik-e-Taliban Afghanistan has to clamp down on terror in any way. They just have to stop their comrades from infiltrating and using their terror tactics on Pakistani civilians and soldiers, which they have martyred in very large numbers in the last 4 years.
But there are other elements, like, for example, Daesh, and the fact that, of course, they have ideological differences with those, whether they can, and the inability or ability to control. That argument, I'm saying. Do you think that that's relevant at all?
Well, it's relevant only to the extent that they have now begun to blame Pakistan for supporting all those elements within Afghanistan that are opposed to the Taliban, when that is manifestly not true. I think there is one lesson that we have learned from the two Afghan wars, one back in the 80s and now in the 21st century, is that this playing with these terrorist elements is playing with fire, and it ends up burning the hands of those who are trying to play. What Afghan Taliban discovered in the last 10 days, that their hands could also be burnt when Pakistan took strict military action against terror hideouts. So therefore, the understanding we have to reach is that Afghan government has to take responsibility for its side of the border, and Pakistan will, of course, take responsibility for its side of the border. And we respect each other as sovereign countries and try to now move away from what some would deem emotional attachments based upon religion, shared culture, or shared language, and to begin to treat each other as sovereign countries who have to be responsible for their soil. And regarding the ability, that argument really doesn't fly in the fact that if they claim to be ruling Afghanistan, then that claim is based upon their ability to fight those who are causing terror. Just as Pakistan makes the same claim regarding we have a constitution and a constitutional democracy on our side of the border, and we are trying to defend that.
In terms of the nexus with India, you also spoke about that. In terms of course, the water issue is just one in terms of what India will exploit and has exploited in the past also, in terms of its nefarious designs against Pakistan. Do you see that nexus being controlled? I won't say eliminated, but controlled in the light of intervention that's coming we are seeing, of course, mediation from Turkey, from Qatar. Do you think that that is being reined in, so to speak?
I'm not very optimistic on that account because Pakistan has tried very hard to not only improve relations, but trying to support the Taliban. First, we tried bilaterally. The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister visited, then our Special Representative visited Afghanistan, trying to sort of smooth ruffled feathers and say that we are here to support you. Then Pakistan tried trilaterally with China. If you remember, the Chinese Foreign Minister was there, and a meeting, very serious meeting, took place on that account to see how we can go forward. And then, of course, Pakistan tried with support of other regional actors in the Moscow process. But the end result of Pakistan's very serious effort of bilateral, trilateral, and multilateral has been this now embrace between the Afghan Taliban and India. So therefore, it's this sense that the Indian influence, which was palpable in the governments of Hamid Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, is making a comeback after a hiatus. And maybe it's because the Afghan government is looking for alternative sources of funding, which recently dried up with the coming of the Trump administration. And I can only speculate that perhaps India offered to some financial support to the Afghan Taliban, which in sort of as a counterweight to what the Americans used to provide to the Afghan government. And so their influence has made a comeback, and I believe it will continue. And one of the reasons that Pakistan has took such strict military action the last fortnight has been to convey to the Taliban that we ipso facto don't have any direct objection to their relationship with India. They could have relationship with any country that they deem suitable to them. But the use of Afghan soil to inflict terrorism upon Pakistan, that is what we find unacceptable and will take action against by whatever means necessary.
Would you stay with us? We want to go to Anas Malik, Bureau Chief Asia News, because he is in Istanbul right now, and we'd like to hear from him exactly what headway has been made with regard to these talks. Please stay with us. Anas, as far as these talks are concerned, where are we with regard to, in terms of the headway that's been made? What kind of progress is there? What is the overall feel at this time? How do you see things in Istanbul?
Well, as we speak, it's been close to 6 hours since these talks are currently underway, not far from where I am at a hotel. There's 7 members both from the Pakistani delegation and from the Afghan Taliban delegation. The Pakistani delegation is comprises of senior officials from the intelligence side, from the security side, and from the bureaucracy. On the Afghan side, it's a diverse delegation as well that is led by the Deputy Minister of Interior. As we speak, there is some probable headway, particularly with regards to that joint border working mechanism. But that being said, still, as we speak, it's still being deliberated upon because, as you just hear, it's the Azan for Maghrib, and it would be they would be just breaking down for the Azan and Namaz break as well. But the Pakistani side is quite adamant that until and unless the Afghan side gives a solemn guarantee with regards to the movement or cross-border movement of terrorists coming in from the Afghan side into the Pakistani side, things cannot move forward. Today's talks focus on a three-point agenda. First is, of course, the joint border working mechanism. Second is adherence to national domestic laws and the international commitments, especially in context of the Doha Agreement that the Afghan Taliban did with the US in February 2020. And of course, the third is with regards to the repatriation of Afghan refugees and ensuring that the issues between Pakistan and Afghanistan are not used as a tool for domestic consumption or domestic politics. As I said, as I talked to you, it's been over 6 hours since these talks are currently underway.
But in terms of the mechanisms, are we moving towards devising a strategy to control cross-border terrorism?
It does look like that. Pakistan has had both, not just Pakistan, but Turkey and Qatar, who are there in the room. They're also pretty convinced with what Pakistan's concerns have been, and they've been pushing the Afghan Taliban to go for an agreement to put a leash on terrorist groups that have been designated and that have been mentioned in the United Nations Security Council's monitoring team's report just this February, which states that at least 27 terrorist organizations, including the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, continue to operate and enjoys impunity from the Afghan soil. So the Pakistani side has been laying out a clear-cut working mechanism. As I said, there are certain problems on the Afghan side, which they say that, quote unquote, that it is impractical, and that from that journey from that being turned in from impractical to being into a more practical mode that is currently underway. The reason we're seeing the delay and the talks being prolonged.
In terms of, we were just talking to Khurram Dastgir, and, he said cautiously optimistic is a word that he used. In terms of the feel of the delegations as these talks continue, are they cautiously optimistic? How are you looking at things? Or is it, more about cooperation at this time? Overall, when we look at, the feel of these talks, the atmosphere, how are you looking at it?
Well, it's been a bit tense. While the talks are being held in cordial environment, we hear those words being said, but it would not be wrong to say that things are tense. Why is it tense? Because we recently saw that the Pakistani armed forces, their security forces, they continue with those intelligence-based operations. And recently, just yesterday, we heard from the Pakistani military's PR wing that at least 8 terrorists were killed. Then we saw the attack in Hamgu as well. So things were tense inside the room, and they have been tense inside the room. So all's not well. But Pakistani side is proceeding with sincerity. There is cautious optimism, but there is cautious skepticism as well at the same time. If there is an underlying mean or median, that is cautiousness. They want to proceed in sincerity, but not at the cost of compromising Pakistani national security and Pakistani national interests. And that is where the virtual red line has been set, that any attempts to jeopardize Pakistan's security interests, Pakistan's national security, or or the security of Pakistani citizens at large, it will be befittingly responded to. The reason in the last talks we saw that there was a baseline agreement that was done, that was to continue to the ceasefire, not until for some hours, but until the conclusion of the talks. Now, that was a very technical term. The talks continue, so that means the ceasefire continues. There is no breakdown on talks. That means
Do you
until
see this as a phase two, and do you think that there's going to be a phase three moving forward, or do you think that there's a likely outcome emerging in this phase two in Istanbul, for example? Or do you see this as a continuing exercise? Because there is, like you said, a lot to hash in terms of the mechanisms, in terms of the cooperation in those areas, in terms of respecting border security, all of those things. So do you see this as a continuing exercise while the ceasefire continues?
I think what today's talks have been focused is to go further or get to a political agreement, so that there wouldn't be more of such talks, but rather action. So the reason we're seeing the prolongment of these talks, while there are speculation that there can possibly be another round, but the talks are definitely heading to a direction where it is more going towards conclusion rather than just being prolonged, and talks for the sake of talks is not on the agenda.
When we talk about, and it's just a quick question, when we talk about the role of the messaging or media coverage overall, in terms of what's been said with regard to water, threatening statements that have emanated, do you think that these talks are going to address those also, as between Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Not right now. That is not on the agenda. But yes, it will be mentioned from the Pakistani side that at a time when the Afghan side and the Pakistani side, in the presence of international mediators such as Turkey, where I am, and Qatar, in the presence of them, there was no bad blood, as they say, that was being spilled. And then came in this statement and decree from the Afghan Taliban regime's leader. So that does so in that does go on to sow in some bad blood or bad breath, and that will have a mention, but it will not be a focus of these talks.
And what about India and Pakistan, India and Afghanistan and that nexus? Will that be on the agenda at all, or that is not something that is going to be, spoken about at this stage of these talks, in your opinion?
I think it is being talked. It is not being talked as much as directly as India and Afghanistan relations, but it is being talked in the context of terrorist financing. Terrorist financing remains a key issue. Pakistan has been long saying that the acts of terrorism has been aided and abetted and funded by Pakistan's eastern neighbor, and there is ample evidence on that. So, in context of terror financing, yes, the India-Afghanistan relation will be talked, but not in the context of bilateral relations.
Right. Thank you so much, Anas. Thank you for joining us from Istanbul and your very, very timely update on what's happening there. I'm going to go back to Khurram Dastgir. Khurram Saab, thank you for your patience. Overall, what Anas has to say, of course, he's saying that there is headway being made, but it's early in terms of, what it will eventually lead to. But he sees, a plan emerging and talks for talks, just for the sake of talks not happening, so to speak. In your opinion, terror financing is something that he spoke about. Self-sustenance, which is something that, is spoken about in the context of the Afghan Taliban. Are they going to be able to sustain themselves, in your opinion, at this time, in terms of what the situation is? Or are they always going to be looking for, for example, the nexus that comes from India, in terms of a stabilizing situation for them, to be able to clamp down on terror? What is your take on this situation within Afghanistan?
Well, the Afghan Taliban government has been unable to implement their key promises in the Doha Accord of 2020 that they agreed with the United States. The first was to bring in a broad-based government. That has not happened. The second was, which has been commented quite a bit, is, of course, the rights of women and minorities in Afghanistan. That has not happened. And then, of course, the notion of that the Afghan soil would not be used for terrorism. This was one of their pledges with the United States also in the future. And all three on these accounts, the Afghan Taliban have not delivered that government. So that issue of terror financing Again, the state capacity of Afghan Taliban leaves much to be desired. And it's a question whether they actually want to or are capable of somehow sanctioning or penalizing uh, what are used to be their partner groups and are now perpetrating terror as TTP is doing in Pakistan. So that is that question will always be in the front. But I do want to draw your audience's attention to a larger strategic issue, which is the border itself. And all Afghan governments in living memory have always raised this durand line because for them it's a crowd pleaser. And Afghan Taliban, which have been accused of supporting Pakistan in the past, have raised this issue again to gain some domestic support. But for Pakistan, it is now becoming a serious and crucial issue of ensuring how we make that border sacrosanct and how to ensure that every movement of vehicles and people we can agree to facilitate our Afghan neighbors. But the fact is that every person that crosses the border has to be recorded. Every vehicle and every object that of trade that crosses the border has to be recorded. And until we do that, we will continue to face these issues of terrorism because unless movement is controlled, we cannot distinguish whether terrorists or innocent Afghan citizens are coming in and going out of Pakistan. So all these issues are sort of coming together at the border and how to ensure that the border is actually, as we understand in Pakistan, is the international border, and how to make sure that the sanctity of the border is protected by both sides.
But in terms of cross-border security, in terms of our being able to have those safeguards in place, do you think that on our side, if we can ensure those, in terms of sincerity of the Afghan Taliban when they pledge this, how would you look at that? Because again, like you said, whether their ability to do it or their their inability in terms of their own resources, those things are also going to be on agenda, and effective mechanisms are going to be put in place to ensure that there is that those things are in place, that they can ensure it.
Well, the principal difference is that um, on one side, there is the state of Pakistan, which has organized and disciplined armed forces and other institutions of state. And on the other side, there is very near lack of state capacity. That cannot be an excuse for them to say we can't stop terror because they have to. These are their partner groups which are doing this. But Pakistan can offer, and as Mr. Anas Malik just discussed this, Pakistan can offer these joint patrols of the border, particularly, again, I will draw your audience's attention to the southern Afghanistan border, which borders Balochistan on the Pakistan side, which has always been a very unpoliced and complete desert area. So Pakistan could offer joint patrols, but Pakistan will now have to think if in the long term, starting to devote even more resources to patrolling the Afghan border than we have been doing. We put up a fence about 7 years ago. We started putting posts after a regular interval. Maybe the number of posts and the number of troops that are posted there has to increase because the situation on the Afghan side, as it appears today, in terms of the economic viability of the state, the ability to feed their population, and of course, in their desperation to feed the population and the economic viability, what kind of alliances they make. Pakistan, as I said, has offered itself. Pakistan has offered China. Pakistan has offered multilateral countries who could come together. But apparently, we have not been able to come up to whatever expectations the Afghans have, and they are now looking towards India, which is promoting terror, which is financing terrorism, not only in KP but in Balochistan through different actors. So we have to realize that this situation that we hope the ceasefire will continue to hold, but in order to achieve long-standing structures that could make this border secure, Pakistan is always open to such arrangements because we have the ability to do so.
But Khurram sir, when we talk about, you've also mentioned this, and I think when we talk about third party oversight in terms of, of course it's being co-chaired by Turkey, Qatar, and to ensure that there is compliance, do you think that there is a likely chance that the Afghan Taliban would agree with this, even in the context of border policing or, overseeing, like you said, those parts of the border which are particularly vulnerable?
I can only again cautiously optimistic that the Afghans will do so because Pakistan, whatever our current state of relations is, both Pakistan and Afghanistan, the long-term interests are for cooperation. They need to cooperate, and Pakistan realizes this, and that's why Pakistan has, for a long time, uh, been very soft towards Afghanistan. And it's only now that things have gone beyond a certain threshold that we have hardened our stance. And the earlier the Afghan government realizes this, that they need Pakistan's cooperation for their own economic viability and raising of state capacity. I mean, one very crucial thing is that on the Afghan side, many Afghans come to Pakistan seeking treatment for their health, for their families' ailments, and so if that border becomes hard and as it's currently stopped, there are real lives that are at stake. So this realization that we may not be again go back to that very brotherly relations that we like to talk about, but we could have a working positive relationship. And if that requires, in the short or medium term, some third party oversight or verification, Pakistan would readily agree to that. But as things stand today, I don't see the Afghans agreeing very readily to that because their state capacity is severely compromised.
And when we talk about, this nexus with India, I know you have little time, but very quickly, in terms of them, they will have to, sort of completely cut that off to the extent that, it permeates into their territory and then, and permeates into Pakistan in terms of the terrorism that emanates from there and the Afghan soil is used. They will have to agree to find, counter strategies for sustenance for their economy, then getting this kind of funding or, this kind of support that they seem to be looking at the wrong place. And for that, there has to be a very strong resolve on the Afghan Taliban side. Do you agree with that? Do you think that, with this intervention, with these talks, that kind of resolve can maybe be found? And they've also seen, like you said, the kind of reaction that's come from Pakistan. And whether they can have, a neighbor like Pakistan, with the kind of power that we have in terms of our armed forces, in terms of our, arsenal, and, have a hostile neighbor on the other side, like Pakistan. So they will have to, have that cost and benefit analysis and be able to come to some kind of an agreement, right?
The truth that is inconvenient to the Afghan side is that Pakistan has finally decided to harden its stance. It's actually Pakistan's actions in the last fortnight that are beginning to focus Afghan minds. That they're realizing that these kid glove treatment by Pakistan of Afghanistan, for many reasons, will no longer continue. The border will no longer remain fluid and open to them. They can't just keep sending. I mean, if your audience, many in your audience may have seen it, but in Chaman and in Torkham, particularly in Chaman, there are tens of thousands of people who cross every day. And to ensure that these are all actual innocent trading Afghan citizens and not terrorists is a task for both sides. And what we have seen is that whenever we have tried to harden the border in the past, Afghan citizens who cross over simply ignore or break whatever safeguards that we have put into. So Pakistan's actions in the last fortnight have finally begun to create a realization that this relationship has evolved into something that is going toward less on the brotherly side and more on the mutual recognition and respect for sovereignty side.
Thank you so much, Khurram Dastgir. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to move on to Major General retired Zahid Mehmood, who's a defense analyst. Thank you for joining us. General Sahab, we're talking about these cross-border mechanisms. We're talking about the ability to ensure that, of course, this border remains safe for Pakistan, and the hard line that Pakistan has taken. And we were just talking to Mr. Khurram Dastgir, and he said the last fortnight has really been important in laying down the fact that, of course, Pakistan will not put up with this, and that it's a hard no. Do you think that it's going to permeate to the Afghan Taliban now, and that it's going to lead to stronger, stricter measures from their side?
Thank you very much, Mahrukh, for the invite. At least I'll be keeping my fingers crossed. I think we all are optimistic about things, but it is a lot of apprehensions are also there. So considering the past track and the number of spoilers in the whole gambit, they will dictate that how this is going to happen. For me, the most important thing is the will of Afghanistan delegation or will of the Afghanistan Taliban to govern Kabul for the people of Afghanistan. There are the certain elements. We all understand this is the government or this is the setup which is the byproduct of the war. And these children of conflict, they're not answerable to their people. There is no prominent or democratic process through which they have come to power. And I'm not foreseeing any prominent democratic process in near future where the people of Afghanistan will decide about their fate, their destiny, and their aspirations will stand out. Their aspirations will lead the Afghanistan policy. So this is purely a Taliban policy. A Taliban who are unfortunately, I'm talking this with a pinch of salt, that who are unfortunately have become a kind of a tool for the proxy sponsor. So they're kind of a...
Also, I'm going to interject in terms of, the regard for the civilians. There doesn't seem to be any regard, or much regard for their own civilians, for their women, for their children. That regard was really exercised by Pakistan. In the fact that, we were talking to them, we were continuously telling them that we will not put up with this, but giving them that leeway because of those civilians, right?
100%, Mahrukh. Yesterday, I was speaking to an Afghan student in a very prominent university, #1 university of Pakistan, NUST. So he was graduating from there, and I was talking to him. He's now doing a research. He's after graduation now he'll be carrying out his masters, and after that he'll be carrying out kind of a PhD. But he was so uncertain about his future. A young lad. If you remember a footballer, a young guy, probably his name was Zaki, who hung himself with the wheel of that tire of that C-17 flying from Bagram base, that famous picture, He lost his life because he had fears that he won't be able to play football. The new Taliban regime will not allow them to put on shorts and play football. So these things represents the feelings of the youth of Afghanistan. So I was feeling a lot about him, that look at those policies which are really, making the future of this young generation uncertain. They're not responsible for what all is happening in Afghanistan. So this is a small number of people who are taking full advantage and who are taking full economic advantage of this situation. And the friction suits them. Once you were talking with Khurram Dastgir about mechanisms on the border management mechanisms and all that.
General Saab, I actually want to come to that. I want your opinion on what kind of intelligence sharing, monitoring framework you feel would realistically prevent this cross-border terrorism from emanating from the Afghan Taliban side.
Mahrukh, if Afghan Taliban's they had in their mind that yes, they want to address this, because it is not only the terrorism or the cross-border terrorism elements, or the terrorists who are moving across the border. It is also related to the illegal spectrum on this border, because there are parties inside, even small parties in Pakistan also, there are groups who are interested in this and who are taking full advantage of this illegal spectrum, and there the whole, I mean, a huge number in Afghanistan who are associated with this illegal spectrum. So they will also impact this. And then the spoilers, as I'm talking about, why would India want that these things are settled? So they must have given them some certain kind of instructions. I hope that they don't abide those instructions. But things are, things happening now. There in the recent past, we've heard about construction of dam, this water, coercion they're talking about. Initially, they weaponized the trust of the people of Pakistan. They weaponized that trust which was established between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Mahrukh, in the history also, in the past also, once people blame Pakistan for supporting these Talibans or Mujahideen, they don't understand the real environment at that time. Pakistan supported Mujahideen against Russians for the people of Afghanistan and stability in Afghanistan. More than Ummah and our brothers and neighbors, it was the interest of Pakistan, to be very honest. Let me tell you very frankly, it is the interest which we were guarding, because unstable Afghanistan will always lead to instability in Pakistan. We wanted a stable Afghanistan. Then we supported these Talibans. We recognized their government along with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Americans were also on board, they were kind of on board till the time this Osama bin Laden episode happened. Again, for the people of Afghanistan. Now, again, we want the stability in Afghanistan, because our stability is also associated. And without Pakistani support, you can't govern Afghanistan. So we don't want to create problems for you. We don't want to create economic problems for you, or military problems for you, or social problems for you. We just want you to make Afghanistan stable. And these apprehensions are not only...
Sir, this narrative, unfortunately, has not, or correct me if I'm wrong, permeated to the people of Afghanistan, or has it, in your opinion?
Look, people of Afghanistan had always been confused. They made. They always made Pakistan a doubtful country. Once the Northern Allies guys, those who were anti-Taliban, they were told that this Taliban phenomena is all because of Pakistan, and this was told to them by none other than our friends Americans. That once they were creating this Afghan National Army, and once they were supporting Karzai and later governments, So,
in terms of the lessons that Pakistan, let's move on to these talks. In terms of the lessons that Pakistan and Afghanistan side both can learn, when we move to, because there have been prior peace efforts to make this different, to ensure, what are those things that will ensure that this is different, and that this keeps or ensures that our territory is safe from the terror that comes from the Afghan Taliban? Do you think that is the deterrence? One, that the Afghan Taliban have seen because of what we've shown them in the last 2 weeks? And other than that, what are those factors, in your opinion, that can ensure that this stays in place?
You see, Pakistan will have to, take strict measures, to be very honest. We have had enough. Khurram Dastgir was also, once he was talking to you, he was talking about what all we have done for them, for the people of Afghanistan. But unfortunately, you have to create deterrence. What is the purpose of a military, Mahrukh? The purpose of military is to establish deterrence, and if it fails, that deterrence is not there in any domain, tactical, operational, or strategic. You have to regain that deterrence. Afghanistan guys, these especially Taliban, they took Pakistan for granted. Initially, even once we were talking to them in 2021, policy was right or wrong. I'm not going into that debate. But once we were talking, they just arranged those talks, and that's it. And at that time, they were very clear. Now there is a serious faction inside Afghanistan, Taliban as well, who think that we need to have a good relationship with Pakistan because that is a long-term partnership. We are neighbors. We can't change our locations. We can't change our geography. So we have to just. There are serious.
When we talk about deterrence, and a lot of this is in a sense, similar to what happened, for example, in Pahalgam. And we have the Prime Minister saying, even in the UNGA and later also, he's kept on saying that we want to have good relationship with our neighbors as a country. Pakistan wants to have good relationship, but the question is, when push comes to shove, it will not allow, we will not allow, Pakistan will not allow the territory of other countries to be used to perpetrate terrorism within our own territory. And that has permeated to India after what happened, with Pahalgam. Do you think it's permeated to Afghanistan in the last 2 weeks? When we talk about deterrence, the value of it, do you think they see it now? Of course, the talks again and the talks again has failed for us to come here, right?
Mahrukh, I would like to remain optimist till the time these talks are there. So I would like to avoid serious comments. But again, as I said, it's a.
We are all optimistic about talks that are happening right now. I mean, in the past, of course, the talks that are happening at this time in Istanbul, we are all, of course, optimistic, and we hope that there will be resulting in concrete measures and concrete counter-terrorism strategies on both sides. But I'm saying that those talks have followed action from the Pakistan Army, from the forces, right?
Let me tell you very frankly, Mahrukh, and let the people know that Pakistan has the capacity in all domains to deal with Afghanistan. Pakistan has the capability to deal in all domains with Afghanistan. And Pakistan now has shown the will to deal in all aspects, wherever they will try to test Pakistan. Pakistan have had enough. And this is the decision taken at a serious place. I mean, they will pursue whatever is required to protect every life, each life of Pakistanis. It's not that ordinary life. And we all have heard Field Marshal saying it many a time that the lives of the people of Pakistan are far sacred for us than anything else and than any relationship in the world. So every Pakistani citizen will be protected. Pakistan's national national objectives and the vital interest will be protected at all costs. Pakistan knew that India is going to play this game.
Do you also see this as, a parallel strategy in terms of what Pakistan, of course, we are having talks and we will continue to have them. But at the same time, of course, we have a ceasefire in place. But if there are attempts to infiltrate, if there are attempts to, of course, permeate Pakistan's territory in terms of terrorism, then Pakistan is also going to react. So it's a side-by-side, a parallel strategy that is likely to be more successful, right?
Yes, exactly. You have to create an environment. Look, this kinetic application is part of the political policy. It is subservient to the policy. War itself, Mahrukh, is a political process. Once we separate war from the politics, or once we separate war from the diplomacy, that is wrong. It is just, instrument of policy. You need to use the war to create an environment for a better dialogue. Why would they talk to us if we are not at the point of from the position of strength? So you need to create that deterrence. You need to regain that lost deterrence if it has been lost, to talk to them from the point of strength. Otherwise, nobody is listening to you. In Ukraine-Russian war, for example, you can take the example of that war. Russians, they never stopped war. President Trump was very confident that it will be a matter of one call and Russians will stop that war because they were at advantageous position. So they wanted to occupy more to have better results of the talks. So Pakistan will have to create the cost of this unfortunate application against Pakistan. And that cost has to be borne by the state which is trying to instable us. And this cost will also be there for the proxy sponsor. They should not think that they will use Afghanistan soil, Afghani guys, and destabilize Pakistan, and Pakistan will let them, Pakistan will leave them alone. It's not like that. That's why I'm saying that Pakistan has war gamed it. Pakistan knew it, that it's going to be a two-front situation for Pakistan by Indians and Afghan, unfortunately. Pakistan is balanced and Pakistan has all the capabilities and capacities, but it is better that we have to stay here permanent. Russians, they came to Afghanistan, went back. Americans came, more confused, chaotic Afghanistan, they left. Indians have come.
Right. Thank you so much. General Saab, thank you for your very valuable time. That was Major General retired Zahid Mehmood. As far as the talks in Istanbul are concerned, we expect and hope, of course, we are cautiously optimistic. I believe that was a word used. And we hope that these talks will lead to a permanent solution and debar all kind of terrorism that emanates from the Afghan soil. Of course, in terms of intelligence sharing, counter-terrorism strategy, both Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban chalking out a strategy to ensure. And of course, we've also shown the Afghan Taliban that Pakistan will not put up with any kind of terrorism that comes from their side. On that note, thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.